All right. So again, back to basics, as always, is meant and designed for anybody to come in. Again, agnostic of agency affiliation, and things like that. Obviously, understanding the value proposition of what Valor brings to the table. Great story always. But in this scenario, what we were looking at is, really it's all about you guys. So you who are in here, if you have questions, would love to always take questions. Last week we had a great conversation about running an illustration with Corebridge. We can always do illustration design, carrier specific stuff, products. So if you have any questions, would love to throw it out. If you don't have questions, as always, I have a few canned things that I can pull up and kind of talk about, but this is your time. So I want to first give you guys the floor to see if anybody has any questions, comments, raw outbursts of emotion, preferably good ones because I'm so sensitive. But just want to open up to the floor right now to see if anybody has anything, immediately.
Hey, Phil. Hi there. Subhash here with you, Phil.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
I'm joking. I just want to lighten the mood. You told about the Batman building. So would we
Yeah.
get a picture? Would we get a picture with Batman on that trip? Because I've already booked.
Maybe, maybe if you play your cards right. So,
I'm sorry, Phil. We all are having a long day, right? So I just want to lighten
yeah.
the mood. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're totally
Yeah,
fine,
yeah.
man. You can lighten the mood anytime. Anytime you can break up this monotone voice, I'm all for it. So, Dipple, you had a question?
Yes, Phil, I was just trying to book a hotel. So do we have session on 12, 13, 14, 3 days?
Just the 13th and half of the day of the 14th. So really you only need 2 nights, the
So
12th and
12
the 13th.
and the 13. Okay, because it says
Yep.
12, so I'm like, okay.
Well,
So
we start
third,
around 9 in the morning on the 13th, and it's
okay,
9 o'clock US Standard Time.
okay.
Um,
So you,
so
so you start on 13th and 14th half day. So okay,
yep,
got it.
yep. So, and like I said, we're gonna have a lot of product conversations. So we have about a core of 4 or 5 carriers that we usually tend to see most of the business go to. But again, the beauty of what we have here is the agnostic side of what we do. So we have several carriers at our fingertips when we need it, but we'll kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive for those carriers and sales ideas too, to really kind of start out the fourth quarter. And most importantly, like I don't know about you guys, but I started planning for 2025 in October. Because most of your cases, if they haven't placed by the end of October, depending on the design and the underwriting and everything goes so on and so forth, you're probably looking at either late December or New Year's. So I always like to say, you start with the end goal in mind, which a lot of people talk about, but really, when you talk about the idea of that, um, you kind of set the standard of what you're looking to get out of this industry. So if, for example's sake, you want to make $50,000, you have to look backwards at that. What is an average case size for you? So if you have an average case size, say it's a term policy, average case size between $500,000, give or take. And an IUL is like $2,000 to $5,000. Now you have to say to yourself, all right, how many clients do I have to get? If it's on the higher end, $5,000, then you have to get what? 10 clients? Is that right? Yeah, 10 clients. So how do you get those 10 clients? That means you need to have 20 applications in. How do you get those 20 applications in? It means you have to have 40 people commit to, some type of movement, which means you have to have roughly 80 to 120 actual conversations and trying to get appointments. So you kind of work with the end goal in mind, kind of like when you're doing presentations, you want to figure out. And so from my end, I have to do that at a higher scale because, what I'm thinking about is the marketing side. The operations side, for those who don't know, we're trying to work on building out a back office. So that way, because we have pieces from some carriers or agencies, like different annuities from different spots to give you the total picture for your customer. And so in doing so, I want to condense it into one spot so you can submit all your cases in one place and things like that. So there's a technology side. Then you have, actual sales. So some people want me to split applications, go on applications with them, or do stuff like this and teach people how to sell, market, so on and so forth. So you have to think about all the aspects of your business, and that's part of, the stuff that we'll talk about too at the summit. So just how do you really get ready for next year, in the end of this year? So, so yeah, other questions? Good start. Nothing. Quiet group. I mean, you guys aren't here just to hear me talk, right? So let's do this. What I'll do is, so I had a conversation with one of my agents. So I was just out in Dallas for a conference, and he had a little bit of confusion between some of the carriers and some of the nuances inside of WinFlex and how to run certain carriers. Thank you, Michael. How to run certain carriers so you get that balance, and the right process. So, for me, once again, for those who, partner through us through 3Mark, what we do is we log in. And again, using them as our back office, we have all these tools at our fingertips. One is a single sign-on for WinFlex. And then we have the term UL quotes, which is really a term engine. But what I usually look at is WinFlex Web. If I click on here, then it'll start the single sign-on into WinFlex. Now, between us and whoever watches this video, whatever time, I have my own version of WinFlex. So I've had it for over, you know, 15, 20, almost 20 years. So I have my own version. So it has extras and stuff like that. So I like to just kind of dive in here. This is where the magic happens, the monotone magic. So um when we look at the idea here, again, objectivity is key. We want to make sure our client gets the best solution, but working for carriers for so long, I know for a fact that all carriers want to get to the top of the spreadsheet. Okay. So when you think about, like, if you went to a Simplicity, a Crump, an AIN, Ash, whoever, and you called them up and said, I need a quote. I've got a 50-year-old male. He's got 30,000 he wants to invest over the next 10 years. They're going to run a bunch of comparative spreadsheets, and they're not going to give you like 30 carriers. They're going to give you the top three, usually, unless you specify you want a specific carrier. So what happens is you have these carriers, Symetra, Pac Life is a really good example because I want to say about 10 years ago, they shifted the dynamic with their IULs with a product called the PDX. And the PDX was the first bonus multiplier product in the industry. And that created a big, you know, storm, I'll be nice, of illustrations that just don't work well. Following suit was John Hancock, Lincoln, Allianz, and several others to try and boost up their performance of, say, income illustrations and things like that, even with a conservative rate of return of like 6.5%. So through regulations and changes, we've had an AG49 revised, I think twice now. So, that and North American was the other one with their Builder 3. So you understand that, when I talk about illustrations, I want to make sure they're as clean as possible, and I want to make sure that they're not muddying the water with tricks and different things. So I'm kind of a purist with things like the S&P 500. I think when you look at track record too, and I'll actually give you a good example, because my boys and my wife and I, we all have Corebridge products, great company, great products. And, Michael, when you talk about crediting rates, so this policy is 3 years old. between my wife and my kids and I. We've had the policies for about 3 years now, or close to. But when you look at how these policies perform, and this kind of goes back to what I did, I want to say a couple weeks ago, I think it was. But just looking at the in-force correspondence, so what I did was I pay $2,000 annually for each boy. They were 14 and 11 at the time. And so if you look at the in-force correspondence, you'll see all of these are separate buckets, okay? They're separate buckets giving separate rate of returns. Every time, what I did was called a dollar cost average, where every single $2,000 is split up into 12 buckets. So I get a diversified approach. I get cheaper costs of insurance by paying annual, but I get the diversified approach of having multiple buckets. So when I look at the S&P versus, say, the Merrill Lynch Strategic Balance, the PIMCO, you'll look here and you'll see you got 100% par rate for the MLSB. It's always been around 100, 110%, but the thing's like a dog with fleas. Okay, 75% for PIMCO. And this is when we have, ups and downs in the S&P, 11.5%. So I'm still getting 11.5% on this product, even 2, 3 years later. So yeah, these two drag it down, but I have a 60-20-20 blend on this product. And, if it continues to perform like this, then I can switch it all to 100% S&P. The volatility control indexes just seem to not perform as well. But when you look at the way that carriers illustrate to get to the top of the spreadsheet, to get ahead of others, they usually use a volatility controlled index to do that. And that's why F&G and Allianz are usually the top for income. But then once you switch it to the S&P, they drop, to like sixth or seventh. So there is some weight to that. And that's why I say, like, I want to at least share this so you see, some of the differences, but the S&P, even in a volatile year, is still holding strong. Subhash, you got a question?
Yes, I had a question, Phil. So my question
Sure.
is that when something has a returns or growth rate of 11.5 and the remaining is 2.42 and 0.87, I understand the 6% dip if it falls down on S&P, but why would you chance to divide that between the other when the growth rate is less? Because even though when the dip is 6.5 or 5.5, you still have 6.5% up for the S&P, right? So
Yeah.
I understand the concept of not putting all the eggs in one basket and diversifying it. But this
Yeah.
particular example you showed me, I was trying to understand what's value or.
So, yeah, if I showed you 2 years ago, or a year and a half ago-ish, the PIMCO was giving me a 14% return, and MLSB was giving me also a 14% net return, and 11.5 was the lowest I was getting. So diversification is key, but if I have most of my bread and butter in the S&P, and the illustration that I ran for my boys, the average rate of return for them to meet a success rate is 6 to 6.5%. Even with these well underperforming, having a little bit of risk inside of it can help you get a higher return. So you have probability stronger with the S&P, and then you have a little bit of risk with some of these because there are some years and times where it will overperform. And I don't need these to be in the 10 to 14% range. I just need them to hit anywhere from 6 to 8%, and I would be happy. Because again, this is not supposed to be a super aggressive product. It's supposed to be a product where I don't lose to downside, and I have the living benefits and everything else too. So that's where I'm okay from a small diversification standpoint. But what I'll show you is from some of the carriers, they only have one index, and it's the S&P. So if I had to pick a product that only had one index, sure as hell better be the S&P 500. So same thing with those who run NLG a lot. NLG uses the pace setter a lot, and they've pretty much gotten to a RICO Act lawsuit because of the subpar performances of those proprietary indexes. So even that, especially when I do like premium finance stuff, because we can do premium finance with NLG, I switch it to the S&P to protect the customer. So that's a big thing. I know. So that's why I say, like, you guys have to take your game and elevate it above, because at the end of the day, yeah, you get a nice commission for the sale, but then you're literally serving this client for the next, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, depending on how long, they're around and how long you're around. But that is your client. So, I think they also need to understand that as well. So yeah, I mean, there's different returns that I had here, but I just showed that as an example sake. Maybe it was somewhere around here last year. Yeah, I mean, so this one slightly better. Um, you'll see here. So obviously the S&P did fantastic for that point to point, but we have some positive growth in the PIMCO and positive growth in the MLSB. So overall return of 9.35%. So as of right now, even with these volatile markets, this was June when of last year, so it was pretty volatile then too. Still had some good growth rates. So yeah, all that to say is I like to still focus more on the S&P versus others. Now, a lot of times when you're running illustrations inside of WinFlex, WinFlex is not a proprietary company software. Okay. WinFlex is designed to service multi-carrier, so you have the ability to run several carriers at one time. Now, Corebridge themselves, they only use WinFlex. They don't have their own proprietary. However, other carriers that we use, Columbus has their own proprietary, National Life Group has their own proprietary, Symetra, North American, all of them have their own proprietary software. Doesn't mean you can't use them, but if you're looking for consistency and you're not looking for a one-trick pony and you want to see some variation, then WinFlex is the best way to go. And also, you don't have to be appointed with most of these carriers to actually get the software for WinFlex, like Prudential, Lincoln, John Hancock. They come baked in when you do your single sign-on through the 3Mark portal. So you'll have most of the carriers there without even getting appointed with them. So that's a big perk too. But if I was to start out an illustration, I would I usually start out with Corebridge because obviously it's the easiest one for me to remember. Raphael, you're gonna say something?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Michi, I know you're off mute too, so I didn't know if you had any question.
I was just going to ask you, when you talk about everybody's trying to get to the top of the spreadsheet, um, when you're in a situation where you're looking at multiple carriers like this, and what's the best way to level the playing field for everybody to be at the top spreadsheet compared apples to apples? I know it's probably really hard to do apples to apples for multiple, the more you do, but this
Yeah.
is where you do it.
Yeah, well, yeah, unless you pay for the software that we use. Like I have Insight and I pay for it because it's quick and it can give presentations and stuff like that. I can show you that after this, but I want to show at least the free, version that everyone has access to, because it does take a little finagling. There are situations here like if we do accumulation versus income, accumulation versus protection based. Protection base is a lot easier to illustrate, but let's be honest, most of us today are showing the cash value growth and the value proposition of growth inside of these policies to sell them. So those are usually the bread and butters for the carriers, and also from the accumulation versus the protection side, the accumulator or accumulation products have higher target premiums than the protection products because they actually cost more. So yeah, I'll show you this first. And we do have discounts if you guys want to purchase that site. It's a monthly fee, but it just depends on how much you want to do multi-carrier stuff like me. So it's relative. But
Okay.
let's say for example's sake, when you see the products too, so I'll pick on Corbridge first, you'll see accumulator. What is that for? Accumulation purposes. So we want rising death benefit, rising cash growth for income later. Protector, protection base. It's designed for death benefit focus, number one, and then secondary would be cash growth and opportunity. So if I did that and I was ignorant to all other carriers, and I came in here and I was like, you know what? Let's look at John Hancock. Protection IUL, accumulation IUL. Okay, well, let's look at Lincoln. Wealth accelerate, wealth accumulate. Those are the same products, just two different designs. Wealth preserve, death benefit focus. So preserve, preservation. So they all have that similar design. Mutual of Omaha, similar thing. So you have income advantage, and then you have life protection. Once again, correlating between the two. So if someone is showing a accumulation product and you're doing a policy review, like, oh, before you buy it, check this out. And you're like, oh, I could get a much higher death benefit. You might miss the mark completely because they weren't aiming for that. So yeah, I agree with you, Michael. Income Advantage is a great product. Also very dominant for the S&P there. So if we look at, for example's sake, starting here, just because again, it's ease of use for me, max accumulator, I'm going to hit create client. And for example's sake here, we'll just call it good old Phil Resch. And I'm going to turn back the dial of time here, and I'm going to say I'm 40. And I'm also going to pretend I'm preferred non-tobacco. So Tennessee resident, solve for. This is where a lot of people get hung up because a lot of people are like, oh, shoot, I got to enter information for the face amount and the premium. You don't have to. So again, when you think about variables, what do you know and what do you need to solve for? Okay, so what do you know and what do you need to solve for? So if I need to solve for a face amount because I know my client wants to put, let's just say $10,000 a year, and I want the least amount of death benefit, minimum face, without turning it into a mech so I get higher income. I'm going to click on this bad boy. And let's say we click on the calendar, because right now, if I did this design with the face amount, minimum face, no mech, I'm going to be funding this for the entire duration of the contract. So I clicked on the calendar, and now what I can do is I'm a 40-year-old male, and I want to only fund this for, let's just say, 15 years. So I click off, and then now I have this, and I just want to double click here and just hit 0, and I'm done for the funding vehicle. Okay, a couple things here though, just to set the playing field. This does not mean after 15 years, I'm going to stop. Okay, this means this is an example of what could happen if I stopped after 15 years. Okay, these policies are flexible. If I want to stop after 10, I have the ability and the right to do that. Will Corbridge keep sending me bills? Yes. Okay, Corbridge will keep sending bills. So you just choose whether or not you want to pay it. That's where we come in as financial professionals every year, annual review, make sure the objectives are still the same. And if they're not, how do you pivot? How do you change it to get them the best possible outcome? But I can look here at age as well, and I'm stopping by about 55. And then after that, nothing. So you can look at year or you can look at age. Now, the reason why I pick year is, for example's sake, you'll see when we look at the illustration, I said I'm age 40, but when you look at the illustration for Corbridge, in line item 1 or year 1, it'll say 41 because they're talking about the end of that year. But if you look at other companies like Allianz, year 1 will say 40. And the reason why they do that is because if you do it by age, you're going to add an extra year's worth of premium on Allianz that you wouldn't have with Corebridge. So if you pick the actual years of funding, then it is a level playing field. Okay. So that's one trick that some carriers do to show higher income is I want to pay to 65. Well, how many years is that? Figure out how many years that is and then go from there. So that's trick number one. So the index strategy here, as I mentioned before, if I'm going to keep it as clean as possible, you can change it 100% to the S&P 500. Now, if you want to get really down and dirty with it, you'll see the 7.02 rate of return. I can actually change that to 6%. So if I went to every carrier and segmented at 6%, you're getting closer to even, so to speak. But some people usually don't look at this and they'll keep it, net neutral because they're like, oh, well, I changed the S&P 500. So I'll just leave it like that for right now. We're going to skip disbursements for a moment. We're going to go to policy options. Once again, some people don't realize that increasing gives you a higher cost of insurance because as you increase to stuff all that cash in, your net amount at risk never changes. So if I'm done funding at year 15, I don't want the policy to continue to increase because I'm increasing my cost of insurance without feeding the machine. So I'm going to click on the calendar here, and after 15 years, I'm done increasing, so I'll double click here and change it to level. So it matches 1 to 15, 10,000, 1 to 15 increasing, levelize it to reduce the cost of insurance. Now, situation here for you as financial professionals, the carrier won't change it to level for you. This is an idea of how these policies work. So you have to call up the insurance company and change it, okay? Or the client has to. So these are very complex products. That's why a lot of times what I like to say is if you have the mantra or idea, customer service mantra of putting together, say, an instruction sheet, something along the lines of this is our original objective. We're going to fund for this long, rate of return, this. And then what we have to do is at this time, call up the insurance company and do X, Y, and Z. So if for some ungodly reason you pass away, things don't work out anymore with you and the client, you still gave them an instruction manual so they understand what they purchased. Because I'm going to be honest with you, anytime you do these policies, year 2, year 3, year 4, someone's going to forget what you offered them. And then they're going to say, what the hell did I buy? Why is my cash not as high as what I funded into it? And then you have to have those conversations, which we can always talk about how to overcome that too. Different story for a different day.
Quick
All
question
right,
for you.
go ahead, Beachy.
What's the best practice to manage that? You use a CRM spreadsheet, you just put it on the calendar, hang it on the wall, sticky notes.
That's what I have I have a separate monitor on my email. I use Outlook, and my Outlook is also tied to my Gmail accounts. And so what I do is on that day, that it's issued and placed in force, I'll click on it and I'll put, say, Demetrius Liptrot, policy 425, whatever, Corebridge. And then what I'll do is I'll have it as an annual. So an annual reminder. So then I
Okay.
go, yeah, because once again, because you're an independent agent, you don't have unless you pay for it, a CRM with all of your stuff. So you have to go to the individual carrier site, get the information, and then, have a conversation with the client.
Okay.
So that's what I do.
Okay.
Michael, you want to share that or just talk about it real quick?
Yeah. So I created a document because unfortunately there's a lot of bad information out there and how these products actually work. And it's speculation. right?
Mhm.
You're speculating on what the market actually does. You're also speculating on what the company does in terms of their rates, in terms of their cost of insurance. So there's a lot of moving pieces to these policies. And if you're not careful and you don't explain what you're doing and how these work, because the whole properly structured thing is a load of garbage, quite frankly. It
Well,
really
because
is, right?
most agents don't last. So,
Yeah.
we're picking up
But
the pieces from everybody else.
but even so, like I just bought, well, I'm in the process of buying one, and it's $1 million death benefit, and I'm only funding 5 grand.
Yeah.
But it's because I understand it's term coverage, right? And so I'm doing it for the coverage. So the idea that there's only one way to use these products is not true.
Agreed.
So what I did was I created a form that says, hey, based on how we're funding this policy, this is the time frame we're expecting, right? If we want the policy to last longer, then we have to raise our level of funding appropriately, right? Because
Yep.
ultimately we're levelizing a risk. So I have this kind of language in there. I also state that, hey, you can lose money in these products, particularly if you're highly leveraged against them, right? And the market doesn't give you that credit. So that stuff is in there. So that way they understand, hey, there's a little bit more to this product than it's just this unicorn, tax-free, risk-free magic retirement pill, right?
Yep. Yep.
And then I also put in there too, because these policies do have to be managed because rates can change, cost of insurance can change. You have to be on top of these things. So I included in there that says, I will review this with my agent at least on an annual basis.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not a set it and forget it.
Yep.
So it's a 2-page document. It lists the premium, it lists what the minimum funding is, it lists what the guideline funding is, right? So it's just like a fillable document that they can initial and then sign at the end.
Yeah. And you give it to them and you keep one too, because so when I was at Corbridge, we literally had a lady who bought a policy from a agent. I won't mention the company, but they weren't there. It was someone else, but they stated they sold the policy. The lady, 3 years later, felt she was sold a bill of goods that wasn't accurate, and she got the insurance commissioner involved, and he forced Corbridge to pay the money back to the lady, reversed everything, and there was a chargeback. And most people are like, well, chargebacks end after a year. Not if the insurance commissioner gets involved. So, stuff like that, when you see it versus when you first get into the industry, when everything is sunshine and rainbows, it's just these are the battle scars that you learn from people. And I've said this to several people. I'm not paid to be pretty. I'm paid to tell you when to duck. And that's what these type of trainings are for, is to help you guys understand, enhance that story for when you have to duck. Okay. So
I'll add too, like I think one of the things in there is surrender periods.
yeah.
Because like what you're talking about, Phil, I'll share this. A client of mine who was my toughest client, but also probably one of my best clients, right? And so she had a policy, a VUL, which works exactly the same way. The only difference is how it's credited, how it makes money, right? But the UL product is the same.
Mhm.
And she had a $58,000 surrender charge on her policy. And she was going to lose $58,000 when she realized that it wasn't what she was sold. And one of the things the agent never did was disclose that there's a surrender charge. Even when she asked to take money out and borrow it, he just said, well, can you borrow it from other places? Remember, this is your long term. He would never mention that agent. That agent, oh, we got all the money back. That agent got fired and terminated as well. And so you're talking about somebody with a securities license too. Definitely should have known better, but yeah, that person was in a world of hurt, lost their business there at Thrivent. So if you're not careful and you're not disclosing these things and taking that extra step, you are putting yourself at risk.
Yeah. It's all about CYA, really at the end of the day. So, in respect to time, I know we got about 15 minutes left, so let me plow through a few things here and just kind of
Phil,
show. Yeah.
Phil, Michael, just on the points which you're saying. So, are these things explicitly mentioned when you're selling the policy or we're talking with a client? Get the
God,
guys
no.
tell these to your client. So, have it, or is it just through guys? These are battle scars you will learn through experience, or is it like a simple guide which you would say, okay, when you sell a policy, for example, if you're selling an IUL,
Mhm.
please mention surrender period, please mention the coverage when you can take loan. So
So,
is there something, a cheat sheet which we can actually write down, okay, before that, like you said, CYOA, how can we make sure that we understand that if
yeah,
I'm speaking to a client with IUL, based on your experience, Michael's experience, and everybody else's experience, I can write myself a cheat sheet. Okay, I need to tell them about this. I need to tell them about this. I need to not just tell them, know about the policy myself first. Okay, do I understand these things or not?
yeah.
So is it
Well,
possible we can create something like that?
I mean, the company technically did, and it's about 40 pages. So,
No,
yeah, I'm saying, show of hands, who's
Yeah.
read a whole illustration,
And that was one of our concerns because we went to lawyer. Nobody would take her case because it wasn't with a national life group. It wasn't with Midland where you have a large number of cases that they can create a class action. It was
Yeah.
with Thrivent, who's not as big, right?
Mhm.
And then the other thing too is the payout, because it was only $58,000, wasn't enough for the lawyers to take interest in it.
Yeah.
One of the lawyers did come back, and I happen to know that this lawyer, he did with another agent out there, they did a YouTube video. He actually called me back, said, "Hey, I'm willing to take a look at this case," but we already got the money back at that point. But I know he's building out a whole platform where they're going to go after IULs, and they're coming for you. So if you're not covering your butt, just be aware what's out there, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's just being honest and transparent. Hey, it's got a surrender charge. You cannot take this money out until you're 10, or this is how much you can take out before that, right? And
Yep.
just disclosing those facts and then having that extra signature next to the statement, because that was one of our concerns that we weren't going to be able to win this because, hey, technically the illustration does say so, and she did sign it.
Yep. That's
But
the protection for the company, supposedly.
right. But we still ended up getting it back because she text messaged him about taking money and he refused. So we were able to show the text messages, say, hey, this guy never mentioned it, right? I mean, know it's in the illustration, but this guy led us to believe it was a different product, led us to believe there was liquidity in the product. And so she was able to get her money back.
But Michael, again, that is the point I'm trying to say, that like with a show of hand, who has read 40 pages of those documentation? Like today, I send a lot of things with Phil and says, just, yep, approved, approved, approved. So nobody reads those things, right? So what the point I'm trying to make here is, what are those points, even though it's in an illustration, which
Yeah.
I can write down to say,
Mhm.
okay, if I am selling somebody an IUL, because that person is mostly going to be a friend or a family member,
Yeah.
and I
Yep.
have more responsibility towards them,
Yep.
how can I make sure that I am not doing something not willingly but unwilling? Like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Well,
So,
want
uh,
to go,
I
Phil?
was, yeah, I was gonna say the big things that you need to remember, and always, especially when you talk about documentation with the customer, is do they understand the objective of what you're trying to do? First and foremost, okay. Vipul, great meeting with you today. Okay, great meeting with you today. Based on our conversation, it's understood that you're looking for a cash growth vehicle to help supplement your retirement. What we can do is utilize a life insurance product designed with a focus more on cash. Now, if someone, for example's sake, like if I just click calculate on this, it's going to give a funky number. Okay. Now, what I'll do is I'll talk to people, because if you show an income with this funky number, say the return I get is 40,000 in tax-free income in retirement. Okay. I might increase the death benefit a little bit. So because Phil Reshier is 40 and he's probably going to make more in mid 40s and 50s, and he can stuff more in. So 176, I'd probably do 250,000 in death benefit, because it gives me a cheaper price point, price break, which we'll talk about later. I don't want to dive into that right now. But also in my terminology and how I would address this to the client is, per our conversation, we raise the death benefit slightly to 250,000 in the anticipation that you will make more money later and you wanted to have room to put more money into these policies. So going back to what's your objective, clearly list it. What is the funding strategy? How long? So I'm going to do 10,000 for 15 years is the initial commitment. And you can even say, if you need to change it, we can, but it's everything is subject to change, So funding, vehicle, objective, and then, and per our conversation, understanding that this is a 15 or 14-year surrender schedule. If you need to take money early, you have access to about 10% of the cash value. However, if you tried to liquidate, there would be a surrender charge, so on and so forth. So that's really the main stuff, is the objective, the funding strategy, for how long, and understanding that there is some market performance that's dictated in this. And if they need to access capital higher than, say, 10%, which is the normal, then there could be surrender charges.
Yeah,
So
I think the big thing is just transparency. Think of anything that you would be upset about if you weren't told that you found out down the road, right? You thought this was a liquid asset, you thought you could borrow, and then you find out down the road you have a surrender charge, you can't touch it. That would upset you, right? If you found out that it was actually tax deferred, and the way to access is tax free, and you surrendered your policy, and then you had this tax bill, you would be pretty upset, right?
Yep.
So it's just understanding, you want to cover the basis that, hey, this is how it works, and this is why we have to do it that way, and just disclose, hey, we can't go above the guideline because that'll create a mech. We can't cancel the policy because it's tax deferred, right? When you're 80 years old.
Yep. Yep.
There's certain things that we don't do, and you just have to disclose that. You just don't want a client to find out on their own because you didn't tell them.
Now,
That's all.
what I will say too is that you can technically do that at the time of you get the policy in hand. So a lot of people will bring the policy to the client and go through all the dirty details. That's the extra level of service that most people do. Now, I know some people will literally get the policy and just ship it, or send it to the client and not meet with them. The design for this is to create the relationship. So you can steal any of these corny lines that you ever want. So I'll say to people, this isn't the end of our relationship. This is actually the beginning. So we were dating for a bit. Now we're married. So if you have questions or anything that you need for this policy, just understand I'm here to support you. I'll check in, annually, just make sure everything's kosher. But on top of that, you can call me anytime. And just really kind of lay in the foundation, because what's the big thing that keeps our lifeblood moving in this industry is referrals. So as I've always said to any agent who decides they want to start working with Valor or has partnered with me in the past, I always tell people, do good for your community will do good for you. You just never know who's going to pop up out of nowhere, but they're not going to know it unless you tell them that of what you do. So that's the big thing. And, some people get that commission breath, target funded, LERP sales, and it comes back to bite people in the butt pretty bad. Because let's be honest, most people aren't going to change the way they fund these strategies. They're going to forget it. The new iPhone will come out and they want that instead. And they end up usually reducing versus increasing too. So just kind of keep that in mind as well. We got about 5 minutes. I know we kind of dovetailed off on a separate piece, but I think it was good. The reason why I say I got 5 minutes is I have a meeting right after this, and then a meeting right after that. So late night for old Phil here, but um, so understanding like this situation, just real quick, like you got cap rate, S&P, and what you saw here was about 176,204. So that's the bottom of the barrel for 10K for 15 years. Now, if I started to like pull out more, so I just hit copy, right? So I have two QOLs, but I want to change the product, I can do that. And let's say, for example's sake, I include Columbus in here. Always pick the later of the products. Okay. So there's 2025. They still have a 2023 out there because usually what happens is there's one carrier or one state who hasn't approved the new product yet. It's usually California. So from that standpoint, you have the old version too, so you can still sell the old version. But if I do this one, um, they have a pretty funky design inside of WinFlex. So I want to just kind of share it real quick. Like here, as I've changed it over, it carries properties over from the prior policy, but you'll see there's like, oh, flat extra. This needs to actually be 0 instead of blank, whereas Corebridge was blank. You have certain rate of returns. Now you'll see the interest rate for, say, the S&P is not 0%, but it's going to change that to the suggested answer. So if I hit fix all errors to just kind of get that out of the way, some people would say, oh, it's fixed, and now I can just hit calculate and I'm good. You always want to check. So face amount, we're solving for face amount. Cash value target of $0 by the max age, which is accurate. They show age, but if you see year 1 to 15, it's the same. Disbursements, we didn't put any in. Policy options, increasing 0 to 14 age, that's wrong, but 1 to 15 for year is accurate. Okay. And then interest rate, this is where you have to fix it. So it changed to 0. And as of right now, they're at 6.36, I believe. So still no error. So we're kosher there. So again, you have to go through if you're doing multi-carrier to just check and see if everything else is up to snuff. Now, if I want to, for example's sake, add one more carrier, for reference sake, I'm going to go back to my first one because Columbus has a little bit of funky design inside WinFlex. But I'm going to change the product once again, and we'll pick on Symetra with their accumulator ascent 3.0. And click on this bad boy and update the client once again. Hey, I got to update one thing, 1035 exchange, perfectly fine. Name, resident, age, preferred, all the same. Index accounts. So they put a lot of reliability in this Putnam, which I don't like. So with Symetra, they actually have S&P and NASDAQ. You also have the core version here, so no bonus, which I'm more of a fan of no bonuses because anytime you add a bonus, it's going to hinder your cap rates or participation rates. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to go over here. So if you want to do multi-carrier, and again, if everything else looks kosher, which it does, now all I have to do is check the box up here that says select all and hit calculate. And whatever isn't already calculated, the little gears, because if I hit in the top right-hand corner and I hit calculate, then it would only illustrate the one I'm on. But if I want to illustrate them all at one time, I can do that. So the cool thing about this is I can also make some quick changes, and I'll do this real quick. But the idea is that if you like this, you can do this with, like, let's say you're doing a couple, so a husband and a wife. Right off the bat, I already know that this is wrong. See 176, 171. So solve for, let's see, no solve, minimum. That'll probably work. Like I said, kind of funky. But now let's say, for example's sake, we have Mrs. Resch, and she's also 40, but she's a female. She wants to do the same design with all three of the same carriers. Well, I have them all checked here. I can hit copy. So now I have 6 fill Resches. I'm going to uncheck the first ones for a second here. And now I'm here below, and I'll just say, because my wife's name is Danielle Resch, okay? You'll see this changed, but nothing else changed, but these are all checked. I can right click here and copy the answer to all the checked boxes. Now I got Danielle. Now I can change female, right click, copy, female. Everything else, again, for sake of time, I just copied it all, so it should all be kosher. But I'm going to fix the ones Columbus for me, and I'm going to run all of Danielle's at the same time, and it'll run them all for you. So if you have a husband and a wife, or I should say spouses, gender neutral, whatever. It's for you Californians. Joking. But the idea here is that if you have multiple illustrations you want to run at one time. So if you run an agency and you have someone who wants to see multi-carrier for your team, you can do it real quickly this way to help them out, or see variations. And so now you'll see this is all accurate at this point because the death benefits are extremely close: 203, 205, 206, 176, 175, 171. Okay, so I fixed the error because these should all be relatively close because a lot of the carriers are literally fighting over very small margins. So the next step would be analyzing incomes. And like I said before, I would probably increase all these to 250K to give Danielle and Phil some room to add more premium into it later. It reduces your income if you kept it that way, but by a very small margin. What it does is it cleans up the face amount, so it's a clean number. It also gives them higher living benefits, and it gives them more spread or room to actually put more money into later. So I know we're a couple minutes over. I do have to jump, but does anyone have any real quick question, or was this helpful?
That was great. That was great. Worth the price of admission.
Well, free as me, right?
Yeah. That is.
Good
Yeah.
stuff, Shalaka.
Yeah. I have one quick question. Now, for selecting that standard or preferred category, so if I selected standard one, and then
Mhm.
actual after medical checkup and everything, that company allowed me preferred one.
Yeah,
So can my premium go down? Because I don't see
absolutely.
that happen.
Absolutely. Well, in this case, because you have the variable of the premium, you're solving for the face amount. So in this scenario, the face amount would go up because you have cheaper cost of insurance. You can buy more coverage.
Yeah.
But if it was the other way around and I had a static death benefit of say $1 million and it cost me 10,000 a year, well, now all of a sudden the premium might be 8,000 a year because it would go down due to the fact that I have cheaper cost of insurance. But that is also based on the rate of return that you pick because it is face amount equals premium times rate of return equals, how it works. So if you have a lower rate of return, then the client might have to put more money into it later. But again, different story for a different day. But yes, if you have a standard that you illustrated and they came back preferred, Either the face amount will increase with a static premium, or the premium will decrease with a static face amount.
Okay.
Okay.
On that rate of return, one final question I'll be real quick. Is there a default rate of return and is there logic behind the default rate of return? It's just
There's a logic. I mean, it's the pricing of the product and the historical look back for the S&P. But all of your products have to fit on one chassis. So, like for example's sake, the S&P is the chassis for most carriers. So if they have a volatility controlled index, it has to align with how the structure is for the S&P.
yeah.
So just kind of getting in the weeds, but yeah, there is a method to their madness. Carriers will look at them differently, but it's also about crediting and what they were able to purchase, in the options that they buy to give them higher illustration rates and higher par and cap rates.
Right.
So,
Great call.
all right,
I
guys.
added Phil on the real indices like the S&P and NASDAQ.
I know.
On the BS ones, who knows? It's all manufactured.
It's a crapshoot. So,
Yeah.
but thank you guys. Tomorrow, please be on the 4 o'clock Central Time call. We got pensions, we got cash balance plans. We have great opportunities for you to learn how to expand your practice and grow your business to help more customers. So, appreciate the time, and you guys have a great rest of your evening. All right, see you later.
All right.
Bye.